The Iranian Foreign Minister Saeed Abbas Arakchi declared the Strait of Hormuz completely open for business for the remainder of the 10-day ceasefire brokered yesterday between Israel and Lebanon. Vessels will be allowed to pass along the coordinated route announced by the Ports and Maritime Organization of Iran. The announcement came as a coalition of mainly NATO countries were having talks in Paris to prepare a plan to resume navigation through the waterway, a key oil route choked off by the US-Israeli war on Iran. French President Emmanuel Macron is hosting the hybrid meeting, which is also joined by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, but not the United States. The mission is set to include military ships, mine-clearing operations, and radar capabilities. The leaders spearheading the mission insist it will be strictly defensive.
Merci beaucoup.
Chancellor Merz said German participation could only occur after a provisional ceasefire and a mandate within a collective security framework, preferably from the United Nations, as well as approval from the German government. The coalition was pushed to create a plan after US President Donald Trump issued an ultimatum to NATO allies. The waterway's closure is set to trigger even more economic pain if efforts to secure a lasting ceasefire fail.
US President Donald Trump announced a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon on Thursday, which has now come into effect to bring a temporary moment of respite after weeks of ongoing Israeli strikes. And though the Iran-backed Hezbollah, whom Israeli forces are fighting, are not party to the deal, Trump says they will abide by its terms.
I think they will. I think it's going to be, actually it's very exciting because it's 48 years. We're going to be meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, as you know, and the president of Lebanon. And I had a great talk with both of them today. They're going to be having a ceasefire, and that'll include Hezbollah.
News of the truce was well received in Lebanon, with people firing tracer rounds in celebration, and also by the international community.
We welcome steps that would end hostilities and suffering on both sides of the blue line. The United Nations, through our political and peacekeeping missions, remains ready to support these efforts and continues to urge the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701. And that full implementation is towards a permanent ceasefire and a long-term solution to the conflict.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed the opportunity for peace with Lebanon, but stressed that Israeli troops will not withdraw from their occupied so-called security zone.
זה רצועת ביטחון שמתחילה בים וממשיכה עד הר דוב ומבואות החרמון עד גבול סוריה. רצועת ביטחון של 10 קילומטר עובי שהיא הרבה יותר חזקה, הרבה יותר עצימה, הרבה יותר רצופה והרבה יותר מוצקה ממה שהיה לנו קודם לכן. שם אנחנו נמצאים, אנחנו לא יוצאים.
Israel says it also reserves the right to attack at any time to respond to any threat it perceives, even preemptively. The Lebanese Health Ministry says Israeli strikes since the beginning of the war in Iran have killed at least 1,200 people, injured thousands, and displaced roughly 1.2 million.
For 1.5 million displaced Palestinians, the choice is between enduring harsh conditions in a tent or returning home to unsafe living conditions, including roofs at risk of collapse. By mid-2025, around 90% of Gaza's population had been displaced from their homes, many of them more than once. Now thousands returning to neighborhoods face the unprecedented scale of the destruction. The United Nations estimates that around 320,000 buildings were destroyed or damaged, equivalent to 81% of buildings in Gaza.
والبلاطه انت شايف البلاطه كلها مهدومه كل البلاطه يعني في خوف نتوق علينا في خوف يعني احنا ما نروح الخيم يعني من الخيمه يعني مشكله يعني نروح الخيمه ولا اول فيها ولا ضل بخيم يعني.
Winter in the Strip has further intensified already dire living conditions for Palestinians. Heavy rain has flooded tents, creating cold, damp conditions that leave many vulnerable to hypothermia. But the rain also exposed the fragility of the damaged homes. Water seeping into the soil beneath these damaged structures significantly increases the risk of sudden collapse.
عمود رايح عمود رايح يعني قاعدين احنا بخطر يعني لو احسن من الخيمه يعني انت عارف الخيمه كيف لا شتاء ولا صيف تحمي جايين عند يقولوا نستر فيها ان شاء الله.
In addition to the structural hazards, returning residents face another threat, that of unexploded devices buried beneath the rubble. The United Nations has also warned that Gaza's debris contains hazardous materials, including asbestos, as well as industrial and medical waste.
البيت قايل للسقوط بتقرير مهندسين وامور هيك انه البيت مايل باتجاه الشمال دائما وابدا عايشين في رعب ولكن احنا بنقول انه هذه ممكن يكون افضل من خيمه او افضل من اجار او افضل من اي حاجه ولكن الوضع صعب جدا.
But Gazans face a long road ahead of them. The UN predicts the removal of rubble alone could take up to 7 years, and the reconstruction of Gaza could take decades and is expected to cost over $40 billion.
Even if the Middle East conflict were to end today, its ripple effects risk creating the conditions for further conflicts. The United Nations Development Programme Administrator Alexander De Croo has told Euronews programme Europe Today. A report by the UNDP warned that the ongoing military escalation in the Middle East goes beyond the region and could push more than 30 million people into poverty worldwide.
Sub-Saharan Africa is severely impacted by what is going on in the region. Small island states, for example, in the Pacific, you start to have a few islands that just don't have enough fuel anymore. So the impact of the war and the blockade that is linked to it has a deep impact, and it shows that war is development in reverse. It takes decades to lift people out of poverty. It takes 6 weeks of war to push them back into poverty.
De Croo, a former Belgian Prime Minister, explained that the international financial institutions should be providing targeted and time-limited cash handouts to those impacted or providing free access to fuel and cooking gas.
An unprecedented crisis is shaking up the French publishing world. 115 writers published by Grasset announced that they were leaving the publishing house after the departure of its CEO, Olivier Nora. French President Emmanuel Macron reacted to the publisher turmoil during an appearance at a Paris book festival.
L'éditeur, ce n'est pas simplement celui qui imprime des livres, c'est, paraît-il, une industrie, comme disait Malraux, mais c'est beaucoup plus. C'est un esprit, c'est une maison. Et c'est aussi, ça fait partie du patrimoine littéraire. C'est nos libraires indépendants aussi, nos maisons, nos différents libraires, il y en a beaucoup ici. Donc c'est cette chaîne humaine qui importe. Voilà. Et donc je pense que c'est très important d'exprimer, de défendre ce pluralisme, le respect des auteurs, l'histoire de ces maisons et leurs identités.
Many authors have accused ultra-conservative billionaire Vincent Bolloré, who owns the Hachette Livre Group, of having ousted Nora. In a joint letter, the authors denounced the ideological war waged by Bolloré to, quote, impose authoritarianism throughout culture and the media.
All three Hungarian parties reported constructive talks following discussions in Parliament on Friday regarding preparations for the inaugural session that will swear in a new government. Peter Mayer, president of the TISA party, which won the election, said it would give opposition parties more opportunities in parliamentary positions and committees. Mayer welcomed an EU delegation to Budapest for informal high-stakes talks centering on how Hungary could still draw down EU funds before the August deadline, announced the Druzhba oil pipeline could restart next week.
Én egy konstruktív tárgyalásra számítok, nem lesz egyszerű, mert nagyon rövid az idő, tehát a kormány, a leköszönő kormány néhány dolgot csinál, de érdemben nem haladtak előre a dolgok. Volt 3 évük, mi alatt lehívhatták volna ezeket a pénzeket, ami megtörtént mind a 26 tagállamban rajtunk kívül. Nekünk most egy óriási rohanás lesz, mert augusztus 31-én sok milliárd eurónak a határideje, vagy annak a felhasználási lekötési határideje lejár.
Magyar Péter a választások óta már 2-szer is beszélt az Európai Bizottság elnökével, Ursula von der Leyennel, aki támogatásáról biztosította. A brüsszeli döntést, hogy mindössze 5 nappal a választások után delegációt küldtek Budapestre, széles körben politikai jelzésnek tekintik. Kónya Rita, Euronews, Budapest.
Is disinformation a threat to the Bulgarian elections? Bulgaria's snap parliamentary elections are scheduled for the 19th of April and will mark the country's 8th election in 5 years. The country's former president, Rumen Radev, from the Progressive Bulgaria party, who has adopted a Eurosceptic and pro-Kremlin stance, is leading in the polls. His main opponent is the veteran centre-right leader, Boyko Borisov.
Bulgaria joined the Eurozone this January, which had really opened the gates for a lot of disinformation narratives. So often the rationale of these narratives is that because we're in the Eurozone, the energy crisis is even worse and we're paying even more money.
To fight off foreign interference threats, Bulgaria's government has asked Europe's diplomatic service for help, activating the rapid response system under the DSA.
Bulgaria is actually not a typical case when we're talking about disinformation, because it also combines the prolonged political instability, the weak regulators, and actually low public trust with a really strong domestic network that spreads and amplifies this type of disinformation.
According to the Center for the Study of Democracy, the Pravda network, which works to spread pro-Russian news, targets Bulgaria disproportionately. The organization tracked nearly 6,000 pro-Kremlin articles published in Bulgarian every month, a significant higher per capita intensity of Pravda content compared to most other European nations. Bulgarian outlets such as Pogled Info also work to disseminate content from sanctioned Russian entities and Chinese state-controlled sources. These narratives have favored Radev's politics, who recently claimed that his pro-EU rivals were seeking to influence the election outcome, citing the annulled 2024 Romanian presidential elections.